Chapter 1132, the break is finally over. Oda has returned from his sudden break, which sparked discussion about his health and the manga schedule, especially following the 2-week break before Chapter 1131, but regardless, this man is now rested up for what could be the most important arc in the entire story, and there is no break next week. I think for the third time we have been introduced to Elbaph. The Straw Hats and the giant warrior pirates, old and new, have been reunited, and unsurprisingly, not everything is as it seems on this island. We got a bit more of Shanks, this time hyping up Luffy and the name of a new character, Ripley, but I think the key points that I will discuss are the following: the structure of the island, the underworld, sunworld, and heavenworld, Luffy's talk with Loki, the note from adventurer Louis Arnott, and finally the mystery of the latest silhouetted character who may very well have been in the making for over 13 years. So firstly, the island itself. The underworld we already know about, but we also have the sun world and the heaven world, or realm depending on translations. Starting with the sun world, introduced to the location once again, and this is kind of the introduction I was expecting following the wide shot of the entire island. The narrator box is basically saying, yes, you are not dreaming, we are actually finally here on this island. That was kind of becoming a legend beforehand. Some people thought we may not even get a fully realized Elbaph arc, but most of us never doubted. And away from the narrator to Usopp and Luffy, who are the most excited for this by far, it's so validating that we're seeing their reaction, but on top of that, the little flashback to just after Little Garden, where this whole thing began, and we're all sharing that joy, we're experiencing that same happiness that they are right now. Although saying that we've actually been in this arc, the Elbaph arc, for a few months now, real world time already. But as long as the manga keeps drawing attention to the fact that we are actually on Elbaph, then it's pretty fair to keep fanboying on about that fact. And lastly, for this layer of the island, it's so vast that they can't see the entirety of it, which makes sense, but what stands out to me is that Dory mentions that there are multiple villages here. And that makes me think, what is the relation between each village? And I'm assuming it's amicable, like they aren't at odds with each other, but more so, is each one slightly different? Like, is there a smithing village that specializes in making weapons for the entire country, and that kind of represents the realm of the dwarves in Norse mythology, Svartalfheim or Nidavellir? Where is the village that Soul and that library is located? I'm also curious as to where the village that Big Mom was in is located now, since that is not the same as this one. This one looks incredible, the way the tree is incorporated into it, so you know we are really high up. I wonder how tall the Adam tree is compared to something like the Red Line. And the other layer is the heaven world, or the heavenly world, which we haven't been told anything about, but I have two ideas for. The first is that this is where the giant royalty lives, where Hyrudin lives, or lived maybe. This all depends on the current status of the country's royalty outside of him and Loki, if there are any others at all, because I doubt Hyrudin is going to stay in a castle on his own on an entirely separate level of the country, because that just sounds depressing. And that's why I prefer the second idea, which isn't really an idea, it's more or less just saying that it's not where the giant royalty lives, and they live in a castle in the sun world, either this castle or this one from a few chapters ago. So that leaves the highest level of Elbaph without residence, and it looks to be the top of that tree, which makes me wonder, because my initial thinking was that it would have something to do with the nika, because heaven, the sun god, makes sense. But the fact that the lower level beneath it is called the sun world kind of throws me off, since that's a more direct link to nika. So now I'm just thinking about what could be up there that it's been designated such a name. The Sky Island clouds have two levels themselves, the White Sea at 7,000 meters and the White Sea at 10,000 meters. So it's probably safe to say that the heaven world is at least at the White Sea level 10,000 meters up, since we do have some island clouds in the sun world in this chapter. So maybe with the heavenly connotations, it may have a connection to the Mad Monk Rouge, but that's a bit of a stretch. And one last thing to mention is that back in Wano, Kaido used an attack which he named Conqueror of Three Worlds Ragnaroku, and there's no way that you can tell me that this is not important or relevant. I would say that the connection may be a potential hint at the existence of other Onis like Kaido, or maybe even ancient giants on Elbaph somewhere, maybe not on that top level, but somewhere. Next is Luffy's complete lack of ability to lie convincingly. He's back from the underworld and he's complying with Loki's request of not telling anybody about their meeting or the promise, and that 100% means that Loki lied about Shanks directly to Luffy's face and twisted the truth in order to get Luffy on his side and agree to free him in exchange. We know that Loki is getting out of these chains one way or another and that it's only a matter of time, but I'm sure Luffy will find out the truth eventually in an attempt to get the key, and he won't be the one to free Loki. And I also get the impression that we won't see him again for a while, maybe a dozen chapters or more, and the next time will be when a certain Captain Kidd runs into him, where he'll present the exact same proposal and Kidd will gladly accept, essentially making Kidd Loki's puppet, and then it will be another stretch of chapters before Loki is actually free. I'm okay with that, keeping Loki's appearances under close control, since it will help keep that mystique he has for a little while longer, and I mean, he is also immobilized currently, so there isn't any reason to cut back to him unless another character like Kidd were to end up meeting him. And now the note from the explorer Louis Arnott, the same guy who wrote about Little Garden and gave that island its name after witnessing Dory and Broggy, thus making it a little garden from their giant perspective. He's also wrote a note about Elbaph, which reads, depending on the translation again it may differ, but it reads, after a bit of fanboying, do not prolong your stay in this country, Elbaph. First things first, this man, this explorer Louis, deserves his credit, because it's not just anyone who can make it into the Grand Line, or let alone make it into the New World all the way to Elbaph. Whether he was hitching rides on other crews that welcomed him aboard to get as far as he did, or if he was leading the way himself on a grand journey of exploration similar to a young Clover, this man deserves a lot of respect for making it as far as he did, regardless of whether he's actually going to be relevant in the arc beyond this note. Anyway, what he wrote on Little Garden must have been within the last 100 years, since his words are referencing Dory and Broggy, whose arrival and duel on the island began 100 years ago, so we have some kind of timeline for this. And on top of that, this note he wrote about Elbaph would have been written even sooner than that, and given the nature of it, it's obviously foreshadowing something that's going to be relevant now in this arc that the Straw Hats are going to have to deal with, which further hints to the note being closer to the present day rather than closer to 100 or so years ago. Again, we have no clue about how relevant this guy Louis Arnott is going to be, if at all, but I do think at least this, the timeline of these notes and his time at sea, seems to be a bit more important than you might think on first viewing. Especially with the context of this silhouetted figure with the woven casa hat walking ominously, it would make sense that the Elbaph note is in part referencing that guy who may be trouble. Not the kind of trouble that is obvious for all to see, but the there's bad things happening in the background kind of trouble. Which again lends to the vague nature of the note, since the note is warning about something that needs to be uncovered. So whoever this guy is in the silhouette, they've got a strong case of being the overarching antagonist for this arc, not Loki. I never thought Loki would be the main bad guy in this arc. There's also still a chance that his imprisonment was based on a false accusation, like maybe his father. King Harald's death was masterminded by the guy in the silhouette and Loki ended up taking the fall. I mean, with Loki's personality and him saying he'll kill Luffy once he's free, he's not going to be on our side either. This note and the silhouetted figure are the two latest pieces of the puzzle, and sticking with that mysterious figure, there's the first idea that they are the mastermind behind the scenes or something, a new character entirely. That's the first idea, but there's still many more. For example, it's Shiki is what everyone, regardless of if they agree with that assessment or not, regardless of if they like it or not, everyone's thinking it. A character of immense top tier strength, confirmed to be canon, but has yet to make an appearance in the manga outside of the Kuma backstory. Add to that the mysterious figure in the cover story that was talking to Crocus, whose hair is pretty much identical to Shiki's, and the fact that they were wearing some kind of woven casa hat, meaning that the silhouette guy, the cover story guy, and Shiki may very well all be one in the same. And another small detail I noticed that may or may not be relevant, most likely not, but Shiki got part of a ship's steering wheel lodged into his head, so that hat that he is wearing may be to cover that up to avoid being detected. And on Elbaph we see the very same beasts in the sea and underworld that have also appeared previously in Shiki's movie Strong World. So there's a lot in favor of him being the guy, and Elbaph as a location works as a place for him to be since he's very powerful and Elbaph is synonymous with great power and war. The other idea is that the silhouette is Louis Arnott himself. Maybe he is living on Elbaph right now and has been since the day he arrived on the island, and his warning that one shouldn't stay in Elbaph too long is one born out of his own experience where he is now unable to leave himself. He very well could be alive given the timeline we've established, but honestly I also think that this warning could be a red herring, and it's actually don't linger on Elbaph too long because it's such a great place and you won't want to leave, because this guy's whole identity has been intrinsically linked to the giants. So what if he's a giant fanboy like Usopp? Because another thing is that the book where his writings of Little Garden are written is called Bragmen, which is a collection of tales and adventures that have been looked upon as ridiculous make-believe in a similar manner to Noland and his experiences in Shandora being brandished as lies, which then links to Usopp and his tales, tall tales and grand adventures, and we know Usopp himself is a huge giant fanboy, so then everything comes full circle back to Louis Arnott. So if this silhouette is in fact him, or even if it's not, if he's on the island or in the arc at all, his character, which we know next to nothing about, has a lot of potential for facilitating Usopp's much anticipated growth that doesn't necessarily need to be strength based or strength focused. And here is one more, the last one, and it's purely because of this image that I came across. I have no idea if the coloring is actually an error, and when I do look up that specific color page or cover story page, all of the colored results show the mystery man with yellow hair, but on the off chance that it is a miscoloring and that this man is the same as the Elbaph silhouette, then I would also be a fan of this option. Who else would be talking to Crocus than one of his former crewmates, the presumably third in command of the King of the Pirates, Scopper Gaban? So all in all, there isn't a bad choice on who this silhouette could be. A new character would be great, Shiki would be great, Louis Arnott would be great, Scopper Gaban would be great. You know, Gaban could fit into the role of being the old friend of Shanks that he thought was dead as well, so that's another thing in his favour. How long until the shadowy figure is actually revealed though? I do not know. Who is Ripley? I do not know. What's in Elbaph's heaven world? I do not know. So great, many questions, so many questions, and that's how you know it was an amazing chapter. I am also very interested in seeing all of the giants reacting to Luffy, because judging from the giant boys' reaction, Luffy is going to be a celebrity here. Same with Usopp. Who knows what Oimo and Kashi and Hyruden have been telling the other giants about him. I'm assuming the majority of this arc will take place in this central level, the Sun World, but even that level is the size of an island by itself. The three levels of the Underworld, Sun World and Heaven World are like three islands stacked on top of each other. The only thing is that someone needs to watch Zoro, because a place as big as this is a prime location for him getting lost, but I guess that also means it's a prime location to explore.